As we approach the All-Star game in the WNBA, I am joined, of course, with the Queen herself. You can catch her on the at her excellency on X. That is HERIXCE. Well, it says it right there on the screen, I believe. So I don't need to spell. I never was good in spelling there, Queen. But let's talk a little bit about WNBA, please. We've got two early games that just one that just went on with the Indiana Fever taking on the Valkyrie. They're hosting the Valkyrie with the return of Caitlin Clark. We'll get to that in just a second, but let's talk about the earlier game. It feels like it started like 7:30 this morning Eastern Standard Time between the Storm and the Sun, where the Sun, who's been struggling this year, they're hanging tight with Seattle. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not expecting that at all. Of course, right around this time of year, hit early to mid, kind of sometimes some teams late July, you get into camp days. And the WNBA has a long-standing tradition of camp days, and it's your host cities will have kids who go to local day camps. They'll let those organizations buy up a rack of tickets at minimal price. They bring all the kids. They have an early game. And the kids, they just get into it and they scream their little tails off, right? And that for most of them, for some of them, that's their first pro sports experience. So
Sure.
it's a good thing that the W is trying to grow its own fans from the ground up. Whether it's effective, unclear. But it's always fun to see a kids' day game. It's always loud. It's always an experience for those folks. But yeah, man, I did not have on my bingo card the lowly Connecticut Sun without Marina Mabry, no less, right?
Mhm.
Hanging with Seattle. You know, Seattle's a really solid top to bottom team. Good record this year. They're out there contending for the West, and they're in a dogfight right now. I mean, the way Connecticut's gone this year, they've sometimes hung in there with teams and then faded as the game has gone on, and kind of expect for that to happen. But if not, yeah, I'm always a fan of chaos among the ranks.
Well, it seems right now Gabby Williams with 16 points and her partner in crime, Skylar Diggins, 12. Only up by 3 as we enter towards the end of the third quarter. As promised, we will get into the Indiana game that just started. Let's go over some of your picks that you picked earlier, and you can get her picks on her X page, guys. You can see, you can follow her right there. You had Caitlin Clark, the return of Caitlin Clark, over 8.5 assists at plus 100, so it's even money there. Boston over 14.5 points at minus 128. I actually, courtesy of FanDuel, got 30% promo code there, so I got it at minus 102. So that was great for me. Yeah, exactly. So, bettors, if you're looking for a nice edge there, always want to look at FanDuel to get the best price there. And then finally, your thoughts in this game against the Valkyrie. You also had, before I turn it over to you, you had a little pizza money on this game with Burton with 8.5 rebounds. She currently has, I think, 10 points or 6 points. Excuse me, I misspoke there. 5 points in with the Valkyrie currently going on. And so what are your thoughts so far in this game?
I haven't really gotten a chance to get a lot of eyes on it. Just kind of looked up and there was the score. But went Caitlin Clark over assists. She's averaging 9 assists per game with her coming back from injury. Could she want to dish it a little more? But that over 8.5 is her season average. I mean, she's certainly capable of it. And Golden State, they're a team that's showing up and overperforming by most people's standards this year. So I think it's a game that she'd be motivated to kind of reacclimate herself there. With Boston, Aaliyah Boston has been crushing it this year. She's an all-star starter, well-deserved. She's been the recipient of a lot of Caitlin Clark assists. And with Golden State, they have Veronica Burton, who's been playing above her pay grade, certainly this year. And Timmy Fagbenley also in her little revenge game where she was left unprotected by the Fever and snatched up by the Valkyries in the expansion draft. But by and large, just looking at that post on paper, though they've overperformed this year, they are kind of weak. So it is a good spot for Boston and Natasha Howard to go in there and own those boards, and for Boston to clean up all those shots. Boston's got insanely long arms and ridiculous reach, so it's good for her to snatch those passes inside. Burton, like I said, she's been overperforming this year. She showed up pretty big in moments. In terms of the dirty work, the RNA work there, we have her over 8.5 today predicted. I thought it was a good play. Just her going against some posts, she's going to have to get in there and scrap a little bit. But I think she's a player that tries to help out and contribute any way she can, and that would certainly be a way that she can.
Yeah, she's currently have 2 rebounds right now, but it's still early as they starting to close at the end of the first quarter. Let's talk about the other 2 remaining games later today. One starting at 3:30. That is between the Minnesota Lynx and the Phoenix Mercury. And the late game at 8 o'clock, the Dallas Wings taking on the Chicago Sky. You had a little pizza on that with Reese's rebounds. We'll get back to that in just a second. Let's look over at the Phoenix Mercury. Whitcomb over 12.5 at minus 110. That's a good number in my book. And then you had, like I told you earlier, the piece of money that you have with Reese over 14.5 rebounds at plus 110. You had one last picks for Dallas. James over 15.5 at even money as well. So what are you looking for in these 2 games?
So with Phoenix, Minnesota, Sammy Wickham's been on a tear lately. She's been 12, 13 plus, and 4 of the last 5. There was one game she kind of disappeared there, and unfortunately, we had her pick that game. It didn't work out for us. But last game, she popped over 30 points in the first half or something ridiculous. I think it was a good play for her today. She's been hot from outside. She's always been a sharpshooter. She's had some really good years playing for both Seattle and New York. So, now her down there in Phoenix being one of the guard options, particularly with 3-point shots. And, she's getting feeds from Alyssa Thomas and kickouts from Satu Sabali, and she's having a great year. So definitely think she's worth the play there at over 12.5 points. Courtney Williams from Minnesota, she's their mid-range specialist. She makes things go. I don't feel comfortable right now putting money on Collier. I don't think she's completely healthy. She's certainly functional. But in terms of, I don't think I would press her for 24, 25 points where I would have previously when she was healthy. I think she would be content to get 18 and stay in the MVP race rather than commanded as she was when the season started. So I think on that team, Courtney Williams is your next best bet. Going against Phoenix, she knows she has to bring it. She's going to bring extra hustle today. So I think over 16.5 points and rebounds would be a really good play there for Minnesota. Now in Chicago versus Dallas, there's not a lot of prop bets available for that just because they weren't there. Paige, I don't feel really comfortable betting Paige right now just because where she's young, she is a little volatile. She's more consistent on points, but with her having the surrounding cast she has there, I don't really trust all of them. You have Arike Agumbwale out. Dejanay Carrington has been out as well for injuries. So you have a lot of young folks coming. Isaiah James, who's our pick today, over 15.5 points there for Dallas. She's stepped up really into that role, filling in for Arike quite nicely. But again, I don't trust rookies very much. So, I'll lay it on Isaiah James just because she's been a little more high performing lately. And if I'm Dallas with the guard core they have Ariel Atkins, but then, they're weak at that drop off after that with Courtney Vandersloot out with an ACL tear this year. So, are they going to put Rachel Bannum on Isaiah James? Where are they going to put Ariel Atkins? And if they keep Ariel on Paige, as I would kind of shade her there, as she's the better defender there, and Paige is, more of a threatening player with the multiple ways she can hurt you. I think that could be some potential for Isaiah James to get loose. Now, if they put Ariel on her, it could be a different story, but then that would, I think, be when you see Paige go off a little bit.
We're here with Her Excellency. You can see right there on the screen, folks. You can follow her on her IXCELLENCY on X for her picks and her detailed breakdown of everything of the WNBA. She's going to be also covering the PWHL later, hopefully towards the end of this year to get some news. And then, of course, they start their season hopefully next year. Before we talk a little bit more about the picks were there, and I apologize not bringing up Courtney Williams. Let's talk about, of course, the WNBA All-Star Game, which you'll be attending this year. Excuse me. So the teams have come out. Of course, you've got Team Collier and, of course, Team Clark. And you can see on your screen there, folks, the following. So you have your just not to name all of them that you can see on there, guys. Boston being one, Wilson being another from your favorites, the Aces. But then you have a couple rookies from the Washington Mystics. You got Kiki and Citron, another Aces player from you, Jackie Young. Gabby Williams, we just talked about just a minute ago. Where do you see? Let's go with Team Clark first. What was when you saw the selection? What were your thoughts there?
Was trying to figure out in real time what the goals here were for both players. I mean, obviously it's to get the best team, right? But there's always, whenever, I mean, you guys know at schoolyard, there's always some politics involved. And as always with the WNBA, I think there's a lot that's unsaid that can be read into. And could it be right? Could it be wrong? It could definitely be interesting. And I do want to get into some of that. I think the starters are pretty even there. You've got, I mean, they had to pick from the pool of starters and then pick from the pool of reserves, so they couldn't name their own starters. Starters are pretty even just because those top 10 players, 8 minus the 2 captains, were just your best players in the league, quite frankly. I mean, you can argue about that, and that's valid, but Clark starters would be Clark at the 1, Sab. You got Satu, Asia, and Aaliyah down there holding the post down. That's 5 solid players, 5 of the best players in the world for sure. And on Team Collier, you've got Paige running point, and then you have Alicia Gray, who's having an MVP year this year with Stewie Nneka and Phee. I mean, those are 2 really solid teams. If they were playing full out straight up, I would love to see that. It would be fantastic. I think where things get a little interesting here is with the selection of the reserves. Just some random observations that I noted in no particular order. I think it's interesting that Clark is the only point guard on her whole team. She is the only point guard that she selected. Well, on the other team, you have, on Team Collier, you have Paige. You got Courtney Williams over there, runs point for Minnesota. Skylar Diggins. And you have KP, who runs some point for the Sparks out in LA as well. So I think that's interesting that Clark is the only point guard on her team. Collier's collecting 4s like Infinity Stones over there, right? She's got herself, she got Stewie, she got Nneka, she got Angel. She is trying to own the post. And I thought that was just interesting where Clark didn't select another of her position and Nneka just out there grabbing and just like she's on supermarket sweep, right? The under 30s versus the over 30s. You know, Caitlin's 23, Fee's 28. But Phee only has 3 players on her squad that are under 30. She's got Ryan Howard, who's 25, and you have Angel and Paige, who are both 23. Everybody on Team Clark is under 30, minus Kayla Thornton. She's 32.
Right.
So you have a little bit of young versus old flavor there, right? Something I think is quite interesting is that Phee took all of the unrivaled players but Nneka. Everybody she took was in unrivaled. And of course, unrivaled being the off-season 3-on-3 league started by Phee Collier and Breanna Stewart. Her first draft selection, by the way, Breanna Stewart. So all of those players that Collier picked did participate in Unrivaled. Kelsey Plum initially committed to play in Unrivaled and then backed out. She had a rough personal year last year. I think that might have had a factor there, might have been a factor there in her decision to back out. But she did commit to Unrivaled. So the only one over there who did not was Nneka Ogwumike. On Team Clark, different story. On Team Clark over there, you have Aaliyah Boston, Ionescu, and also Jackie Young, who were unrivaled, but the rest of them were not. Asia Wilson sat out. Iria Finn and Citron were rookies. Back on Fee's side, obviously Paige Beckers is a rookie, but she has already committed, as has Flau'jae Johnson out of LSU, to be unrivaled moving forward. So she was not a part of last year, but she was involved in unrivaled. I think it's interesting that during CBA negotiations, Phee Collier is a VP of with the union. She's Phee is one of the vice presidents along with Alicia Clark, Breanna Stewart, and then Nneka Ogwumike is the Players Association president. Phee swiped up all of the leadership committee. She swiped up all the executive committee on her side. I think if I'm just looking at it, I think it's interesting that Clark swerved the people that she's kind of had past beef with, and by beef, I mean, is there really beef, or is it professional beef, or on-court beef, or internet beef, or whatever, fan beef, whatever have you. But she famously ran into Alyssa Thomas and flopped, and then she swerved Alyssa Thomas drafting in this draft. And, she and Ryan Howard had a little dust up regarding flopping earlier in this season, and she swerved having Ryan Howard on her team. I'm not saying anything was deliberately done, but I do think it's an interesting observation. I think if I'm just looking at the full squad, I think Clark's group is young and hungry, but I think Collier's group is the bunch that you want on your side if you're at Waffle House and things go south. She's got some folks over there who will scrap and claw, and maybe the All-Star game will give us some opportunity for players to play a little more full out this year, which would be fun for us to see.
Yeah, I have no doubt with the amazing play by the rookie Paige Beckers out of Dallas there. But Stewie, of course, Gray, you got NECA. So I agree. I when I saw this and when you mentioned it, where it just seems a little ironic that Caitlin Clark is the only in her position, and I'm not taking her anything away from her, her skills or anything like that, but not picking up a backup. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it right there where you had Williams, Diggins, just to name a couple, from Collier's side on her team. I don't get it. I don't understand that.
You have some people over there who certainly can handle the ball. I mean, Sabrina can run a little point. She's done it in spots. Hurts her own point production, but she's capable, right? Satu Sabali can run a point forward if you want her to. Gabby Williams is probably the most athletic person in the WNBA, quite frankly. Jackie Young can run a little bit of point. Again, also point production suffering. Kelsey Mitchell's run a little bit of it for the Fever. So, I mean, she has some capable ball handlers over there. It is an all-star game. But just on paper, I like to find observations and trends. They just kind of popped to me, and I thought that was, Collier's swiping up all of her fellow fours, and Clark didn't. I think it's just an interesting something to I don't know, point out.
Was there anything interesting to you when you saw the selection, from Caitlin, from the other players, when the selection started to come out, or when they quote unquote draft, when they were drafting their players for their team? Did you notice anything that kind of hit the alarm button there for you?
The first thing jumped out to me immediately was, again, as we've talked about on this show previously, this time of year when the league gets together right around the All-Star time is when your commissioner becomes more visible. So Kathy steps out and she has to answer a few questions publicly. The players get a little more loose-lipped about certain things, and particularly in CBA negotiation years or years leading up to it, the league and the union have these meetings because everybody kind of comes together for All-Star weekend. And so there's a lot being said and a lot more that will be said, but I think there's a lot going unsaid. And I just think it's interesting when you have your players show up for, your WNBA All-Star draft. You have Caitlin Clark in her Indiana basketball shirts and her practice shirt repping her team, and you have Phee Collier roll up in an Unrivaled shirt. And Unrivaled is paying their players $300,000 a year. And negotiations are contentious and kind of leaking out a little bit of the players' unhappiness at the league's current offers and willingness to hear, the things that they want from their perspective. You have a player who founded, a league that you could look at as a sort of competitor. I would think that Stewie and Phee and most folks would look at it more as an enhancement of the WNBA because it does run in the off season. But when your side hustle starts paying more than your main gig, and Unrivaled has been praised by players universally for the things that they were able to provide the players and offer the players and stuff like childcare. As more WNBA players become mothers, they shouldn't have to worry about where their kid is, or their spouse should be able to watch the game, without having to care for their kid directly. Other pro leagues take care of, their wags and their players. And so, it's different here. And with women's sports, there are certain things you have to navigate, such as motherhood, that you can just sort of overlook when it's male athletes. But, the W is different. But I think Phee, being a founder of Unrivaled, who provides all these things that the players want and are looking for, many of them. I mean, certain stuff, you don't need charter flights for Unrivaled because they're centrally located. But when you have a league that, I founded and look, we can do all this stuff, but you're saying that we can't do all of that. You know what? Fine. Our negotiations aren't going the greatest. Bam, wear my Unrivaled shirt. I think that was a statement. And I think it was an intentional statement.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we'll leave you with this. We talked about the expansion in our previous video. And then just a little bit, your opinion of what should happen with the CBA. I get where the money is coming from. You've got a different, you said side hustle, the main gig. I get all that. I speak that language. I see what they're trying to do. Some may take that when you're wearing it on rivals, and you're sending a message. You're definitely sending a message to Kathy, but maybe Kathy just got slapped in the face by someone wearing that. You see what I'm saying? And it all comes down to the money. But what does the CBA need to do so they can come together and avoid like a lockout?
I mean, you have to find a solution that I heard this quote once that nobody's happy with, but everybody can live with. And the reality here is that you have two competing interests, and one group has, in my view, all the leverage, and the people who write the checks aren't understanding the little leverage that they don't have, frankly.
Sure.
And in terms of what the players are looking for, it's they're not looking for ridiculous. I think popular, people conflate the United States women's national soccer team and their fight for equal pay with the United States men's national soccer team, right? And they wanted to be paid equal. That's not what the WNBA players are seeking here. You can Google. Kelsey Plum had a really good interview a couple years ago on what the players are looking for, and the men she was talking to in the interview were just aghast because they're not looking to make LeBron money. The thing that they want is one, charter flights codified into the CBA. Currently, players do fly charter, kind of, but it's not stipulated as part of their collective bargaining agreement. That changed last year. The players have been fighting for charter flights for literal decades because these are tall women, right? You have women who are 6'4", BG is 6'9", and they've been flying coach. That's not a professional environment. That's ridiculous. And then you want to talk about safety concerns, and the players have been like, hey, we don't want to be accosted in airports because we exist and we're recognizable because we're 6'4", 6'9", right? And the league and Kathy as the face of the ownership, she was just kind of like la 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 and didn't consider it a priority until last year. Caitlin Clark comes into the league, high profile. Caitlin Clark flew coach, and then what do you know? There's a crowd of people stalking her in an airport. So it validated those concerns that those vets had been bringing up for a long time, concerning player safety. And so they came to sort of a memo of understanding between, okay, so all right, we get it. So now you're going to fly charter because it looks really bad if we don't let you. But that needs to be formally stipulated. So they want charter flights. They want increased family planning services. WNBA last CBA round really went into the motherhood aspect more so than any other league had. Now you have players like Cyan Parker-Tice who just had, congratulations, CPT, just had a baby recently within the last couple of weeks. She's, of course, on the suspended list with the Las Vegas Aces because that's how you have to classify it right now.
Right.
But she's still being paid. And that was the type of stuff that was codified into the last CBA. I know players now are looking to get coverage for family planning services. There are multiple players who are mothers via surrogate. There are multiple players whose partner has carried their child, gay or lesbian players, however they identify, their partner has carried their child, egg retrieval. And that's something that these players are interested in. So increased family planning services, charter flights. But the real big point of contention here is obviously money. And what the players want is revenue sharing, which is what the NBA has. The NBA salary cap is tied to how much money that they bring in. It's a more fair conceptual, structure because everybody does better, everybody benefits. Now, of course, your owners don't want that. They want to sit on their Scrooge McDuck piles of cash. As things are currently, and to be quite frank, if I was WNBAPA, lots of letters. If I was on the exec committee, I would roll Caitlin Clark out for an ad, have her sit there with a flashlight even, and just be like, look, hi, my name is Caitlin Clark. There were X amount of jerseys with my name sold on it last year. I made $0 from those jersey sales because right now WNBA players don't make any money from merch sales. And that's trash. And the players want that type of thing. They're profiting off my name, image, and likeness, which I can profit off of personally as a collegiate athlete, but as a professional, now I sell my jersey and I get nothing. That's trash. And that's the type of stuff that the players are looking for. They're looking for a percentage of media rights deals. The way the NBA is structured right now, 50% of basketball related revenue goes to the owners and 50% of basketball related revenue goes to the players. And by that, I'm talking ticket sales, broadcasting money, and merch. Everybody does better, everybody benefits. But
Yep.
as things are right now, you have the owners who are benefiting, but are they really? Because there's not transparency with the league's financials at all.
Sure.
People will tell you that, oh, well, the WNBA still lost this much money last year, but you'll read another thing that said they're profitable by $2 billion. And so there's no transparency there at all. And there's a huge shell game when it comes to revenue. And I think a trend that we as fans could pay attention to is this relationship between the WNBA and the NBA. And when the WNBA was started, it was kind of like the little sister of the NBA, and your
Mhm.
franchises also had NBA franchises there, right? So you had, the Washington Mystics and the Wizards, right? You had the New York Knicks and the Liberty. So you had kind of a brother sister team. And as the league evolved, into what it is now, the trend moved away from having NBA owners and moved more into private ownership groups, where you have the ownership group of 4 women, I think it is, in Seattle, that own that team. So they don't have that tie to the NBA. But the expansion markets that Kathy's all chosen: Portland, Toronto, Cleveland, Detroit, Philly. They're all NBA affiliated in some of those ownership groups. I mean, Dan Gilbert's going to own the Cleveland team. Dan Gilbert owns the Cavaliers. So
Right.
what exactly is she looking for here? There's a conflict of interest as to whether the WNBA is kind of property-ish or a subsidiary of the NBA. Because if you look in the Hamby court documents, the WNBA says it owns itself, and it's this collective. If you look at the NBA, it says the WNBA is a subsidiary. So the WNBA doesn't know who it is and where they want to go. But then you have Kathy, who has the audacity to come out and tell, apparently, Neko Ogumake, Miss President, Madam President, tell her that she doesn't understand the business side of things. That was a quote from WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, had told the Players Association president that she doesn't understand the business side of things. And also on that executive committee is 2 players who have literally founded a league that pays their players more than what your league pays, and you're telling me they don't understand the business? Come on. Come on. The league needs to come to the table with a viable offer. Nobody benefits from a lockout in this.
Right.
But the players have other options. I can go to Unrivaled and make my 300 G's. It's not ideal. It's 3-on-3, but I can make money there. It's more than I make
Sure.
here. I can
Sure.
go to Europe and play. Do I want to? No, but I mean, players have done it for literal decades. Players have options. The league, a little short on options. And so I think
Yeah.
the league needs to understand they're not negotiating from a position of strength here.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think that's really unfair that with the revenue sharing with the jersey sales that you just mentioned, with Caitlin Clark as being an example. But I think they should be. It should, everybody should have a piece of the pie. That's what it is. And they don't have revenue sharing in Major League Baseball.
Right.
And that's why when the season starts, okay, hey, maybe 10 to 15 of those teams, not even chance of going to the World Series. Where the WNBA, if you make it revenue sharing, just kind of like the NFL, and I'm not comparing the two, but I'm just making my point. My point is, at least the league doesn't go down. So, hey, look, if you're an owner, you're making maybe $5 million a year. I can live with making 4.5. Come on. I mean, you see what I'm saying? Don't quote me on the number. I'm just saying,
it's penny wise and dollar foolish. It's exactly what we're nickel and diamond and stuff over here, where if everybody just comes together and behaves, this thing is going astronomical. And there's no reason to believe that, with the influx of new talent that now people are watching, the machine feeds itself. There's no reason to believe there's going to be this mass drop off of whatever, because the league was already trending upward, albeit slowly, before Caitlin Clark, gasoline, and we exploded here. But I think there needs to be some realistic discussions that are had, and you can sense the players are frustrated with the lack of that happening. And so here we are, and we'll see what comes out of Indy. I'm predicting a last second agreement, but if the players are willing to stick it out and stay together, which this bunch always, the WNBA has always stuck it out and stayed together. I think it would 100% be worth a labor stoppage there and a strike.
There's no question about that, and I don't blame any of these hardworking women. And I've seen it. I've seen the game, etc. But we appreciate, of course, Queen, your time. You can catch her on her Excellency and you can see there on the bottom her tag there. And you can follow her on X, and she can give you, of course, she helps us out with her tips in the WNBA and her prop bets, of course. And hit her up. Make sure you follow her, and hit us, and make sure you hit the subscribe button. And we will definitely catch you next time. See you later.